walk into the restaurant.
I grabbed a vase and I smashed it over the back of his
One
head.
of those girls on the poster.
Papa, did you enjoy the striptease?
He was a liar. He had lied to me about everything.
I think I became a lesbian that night.
Giving me a heart attack. And then he laughed.
The scream is powerful.
We're all gonna die. We're all going to die.
My daughters are giving birth to larvae, and it's my birthday.
I'm just gonna tell it like it is.
Well, I don't know what it was, really. Maybe he was in love with me. Maybe he was depressed. I don't know.
I lived the first 40 years of my life living a lie. I can never understand why nobody in the family ever told me this sort of secret.
I never really had a problem meeting men. I was on television for many years, and a lot of people, men in particular, were intrigued. They wanted to meet that girl on TV, which pretty much grossed me out.
Tell it like it is.
A while ago, I was seeing this psychiatrist. I was having a hard time walking around, basically making decisions. I'd been living my life as an actor, and I was having a philosophical crisis about how to be a person and an actor at the same time.
I was approaching my mid to late 30s, and although have dated significant numbers of men, I really haven't been very lucky for various reasons. I've always met the wrong guys.
My mother was born and raised in England, and she grew up on the southwest coast of England in a place called Falmouth. During the Second World War, Mum met and married a man by the name of Dennis, and she moved up north to start a new home with him and his family. Dennis was enlisted into the British Army and sent overseas to Belgium to fight the Germans.
So my friend was seeing this guy, Dr. Andrew, and she said he was really good, so I thought I'd go try him, and I did, and I liked him. He was really good. He barely said anything a lot of the time. Most of the time he would just agree with me in a blank-faced sort of way. And I remember his office really well, and he had this huge black chair, black leather chair, with a long crack up the center of the back pillow. And then there was this long Chesterfield right in front of the chair, which I always sat on. Always, when I sat on the couch, I always sat on the far left-hand corner. And he generally, a lot of the time he would say to me during a session, "Why don't you lay down on the couch? It would make you feel better." And I always felt a little uncomfortable about that. So I said, okay, well, no. I'm not going to lay on the couch.
It came as somewhat as a surprise when my mother called me one day to say, "Erica, I just got a call from a matchmaker, and she has someone for you." And I said, "Mommy, did you set me up?" She goes, "Oh, no. This woman just called me out of the blue, and she said that she has someone for you. This one is gorgeous. He looks like a movie star. He does karate. He's an inventor. This one's going to go fast." So my mom tells me that, and we howled on the phone together. We laughed and laughed and laughed, and then I said, no.
My mother moved back home to live with her family. While she was there, she went to work in the local recreation center, which had been set up for the American servicemen that were stationed in Falmouth. She met this young naval officer called Mario. He romanced her, and they had an affair, and she got pregnant with me. You know, he really looks young. He was 19, and my mother was 21. And I was born in December of 1944.
And so my mom just dropped it. We continued our conversation, and at the end of the conversation, I don't know, something just happened in my brain, and I started to think about the fact that I had recently stopped hosting a show called Real Life, and I had consciously said to myself, I'm going to stop hosting a show called Real Life and actually start having a real life. So I said to my mom, "Do you think that I should go out with him?" And she said, "You know what? You might as well. I mean, what have you got to lose?"
Mum wrote to Dennis and explained the situation to him, and she said, you know, she wanted a divorce because her and Mario wanted to get married. I think he probably understood that it was wartime, and all kinds of things happened. People didn't know whether they'd be alive or dead the next day, so you sort of did what you felt you had to do.
I remember he was really, really thin. So thin that when he crossed his legs, both his feet touched the ground. He had this huge head on top of this little thin neck, and it was round like a saucer, and he had these big, bulbous, bloodshot eyes. Occasionally, when I was feeling sad, he would make me tea. I always actually thought that was a little weird because I'm supposed to be crying. I mean, you cry sometimes in therapy, and I always sensed he was a little nervous when I started crying, and he'd always, have to go make the tea.
The divorce still hadn't come through. Mario was shipped back to the States. So Mum, she couldn't go with him. He left under the premise that Mum would come out as soon as the divorce had become final and they would be married and she'd start a new life with him in America.
Things were good. I mean, he was really good for a while. We would have good... He was very helpful. We talked about all sorts of things. We talked about love and hate and ice cream and suburban living and the roles we play.
So we started playing phone tag, myself and this guy whose name was Terry. And he left me a message. He goes, "Hi, how are you?" "Great." And he started to have this weird conversation with himself. I thought, okay, he's a weirdo. I called him back and I said, okay, let's go out.
Every now and then when he did talk, he would talk to me about things he was unhappy about in his life, which I always found a little weird. But, he told me a little bit about his family, and he talked to me a lot, actually, about how much he didn't like medical school.
He went back and sent letters, and his family sent letters and parcels, and all, everything was going along fine until suddenly these letters abruptly stopped coming. And although Mum wrote and asked, for an explanation, she never ever got a reply from him, and she just felt that she'd been abandoned.
And then one day I asked him if we could go deeper because I felt like we were just skimming across the surface of things. I wanted to look at my dreams, maybe do some Jungian work. And he got very defensive, and he said, "Well, why don't you go to a Jungian analyst then? If you laid on the couch, you'd be able to access your subconscious better." And I was like, well, yeah, I know, but I don't want to lay on the couch.
The war ended, and on a chance meeting, she ran into Dennis again. And Dennis started courting her and finally asked her to remarry him, which she agreed to do.
I remember that very clearly when he came to get me because I was living with this guy. We were sharing my house at the time, and the two of us were upstairs peeking out the window. And the first thing I noticed is that Terry drives up in a car. And I was so excited because he had a car. Because most of the guys I dated at this point were more of the starving artist type, and very few of them actually had cars. So that was a good sign.
There was this other time I came in, and it was awful. He was sitting in the chair. I came in, and he had this huge, his right cheek was swollen out like, he had a carbuncle. It was like swollen, like this huge cheek. And I said, "Andrew, are you okay? You look beaten up." And he just sat there and he goes, "It's an abscess." And I was like, "Oh, are you okay?" And he didn't want to talk about it. It was clearly something he didn't want to talk about. So I just decided to leave it alone.
Life went on. I had a normal childhood, a very happy childhood. Spent all my summers in Falmouth with my grandparents on the beach and just having a wonderful time. The happiest memories of my childhood are being with my grandmother. I married and came to Canada with my husband. Then in 1973, my parents separated, and then they got divorced a few years later.
He comes to the front door, and I said to him right away, "Listen, I'm in the middle of training for a half marathon, and I just did my first long training run today. I think it was 2 or 3 hours, so I just warned him in advance that if I started yawning during our dinner, that it's not that I was necessarily bored, but rather that I was probably tired. And he said, "Have you ever done acid?" I said, "No." And we start walking towards his car.
Tell it like it is.
He goes, "Well, you know when you do acid, you get this really clear-headed feeling?" I said, "No, like, I don't do drugs." And I'm thinking, okay, he just did some really weird drugs, and I'm walking to his car. He said, "Well, I just did this great stuff called ginkgo biloba, which is an herbal pill or something which enhances your memory." And he goes, "Yeah, I just did this great stuff, and it's really good for my karate and great for my golf game." And I went, "Oh, okay." And I relaxed a little bit. I mean, I didn't know what the actual date would be like, but at least he wasn't going to be high on acid or something.
Then one day, I got a catering gig, and I had to cancel. It was the night before a session, and I never canceled, so I thought, okay, he'll understand. He understands my freelance predicament sometimes. So I had his home number that he'd given to me for emergencies, so I called him, hoping to get his machine just to leave a message. And he answered the phone.
My mother, after the divorce and going through some old papers, had found a letter from Mario all those years ago, and she decided to write. She wrote him a letter, and the letter was returned to the Utica post office because the address no longer existed. The postal worker who dealt with the returns happened to know Mario and took the letter personally to him. And Mario immediately wrote to my mother.
And I said, "Oh, Andrew, I'm really sorry." And I explained to him that I had a catering gig and I couldn't come to the session the next day. And he got really mad at me. He said, "You can't go calling the night before. You know that." And I said, "Well, yeah, I know, but, you know, like, I don't usually cancel, and I just thought you'd like to know, and I didn't know how to get a hold of you, and I really have to take this gig. I need the money." And then he just launched into me. "You know, I have a daughter in school and a mortgage on my house. I can't have people doing this." And I was shocked that he was telling me this personal information, and I just said, "Well, I'm sorry, I have to do the gig, and I'll see you next week."
I got a phone call from my mother saying that she was going to come out for a quick visit. And after a few days, she sat me down and told me this incredible story, just right out of the blue, that Dennis wasn't my real father, that my real father was an American naval officer by the name of Mario, and he was alive and well and living in Utica, New York. I was in a state of shock, and when she actually told me, I laughed, and I said to her, "Mom," I said, "I just didn't know that you had this in you. And, you know, if you knew my mom, I mean, she's just this sort of gentle, sweet English lady, and you would never ever think that she could have sort of had this sort of shady past."
So we went out for dinner. He took me to the fish house, and we started to talk, and I said, "Why do you use a matchmaker?" He said, "I never hired this matchmaker." I said, "I don't understand." What happened was, he was working in an office, and his business partner, he was looking for some action. So he called this matchmaker, a real Jewish matchmaker. This woman walks in and she sees Terry, checks out his finger and says, "What's the matter? You're not married?" "No, I haven't found the right girl." And she says, "What are you looking for?" Well, he said, No, I'm fine. Thanks very much." And she said, No, what are you looking for?" He said, "Well, I'm looking for someone who's athletic, someone who's career-minded, someone who likes music." And the list went on. And she said to him out of the blue, "Sounds like you're looking for Erica M." And he said, "If you can get me a date with Erica M, you're in business." It was an okay first date. It wasn't love at first sight, but I liked him.
I can never understand why nobody in the family ever told me this sort of secret that I was adopted by Dennis, and nobody in the family, either on his side or my mum's side, nobody ever let that secret out. What had happened was Mario received a letter from my grandmother telling him that my mother was no longer interested in coming to the States to marry him, that she had met somebody else, and he was not to bother her again. So, of course, he didn't. And my grandmother was intercepting the mail So my mother's letters would never ever get to Mario, and Mario's letters would never ever get to my mother.
So a week goes by, and I come back, and I've been thinking about it, and I'm a little pissed off because I didn't understand why he got so angry at me and why he was telling me all his personal problems. So I sit down, and I go in, I sit down, and he's sitting there, and there's this moment, and I say, Andrew, you know, I'm a little pissed off, I think. Oh, you are you? Well, yeah. I don't understand why you got so angry at me. I mean, all I did was cancel an appointment. It's not like I'm a problem patient, canceling all the time. Well, there have been times. Well, not really, and when I've canceled before, I've given you a lot of notice. The only reason why you canceled is because I'm on OHIP and you have no respect for the money I lose because you think I don't have to pay it. You're just like your mother. What? What's that got to do with my mother? Your mother took advantage of your father and pushed him just the way you pushed Jack. What are you talking about? What's this got to do with anything? Why are you bringing this up? That's not even why I'm angry. Because all you care about is yourself. Well, yeah, but still, I don't know why you're telling me this. You see, when I had my abscess and you came in and all you cared about was you and you didn't even ask me about my abscess. Yes, I did. You didn't care. Yes, I did. I just didn't know how much I was supposed to ask you about your life. All you care about is being successful. Well, yeah, that's why I'm here. Well, that's it. Our time is up. What? I don't think we should see each other anymore. What are you talking about? What on earth are you talking about? This has got nothing to do with anything. You can't just fire me. Can't we talk about this? We have to talk about this. That's why you're here. No, I think our time is up. There's nothing more I can do for you. I don't think we should see each other anymore. What?
Tell it like it is.
I just sat there completely stunned and shocked and hurt, and I was trying to figure out why he was being so mean to me, why he got so angry because I had to cancel an appointment, and why he didn't want to see me anymore suddenly because out of nowhere, because I missed an appointment. It all seemed so strange to me. So I said, Andrew, are you in love with me? There was this silence, and he looked down at his hands, I remember, and there was this barely audible he had a barely audible voice, and he said, yeah, right. As if I would let it go that far. And by this point, I'm crying, and I just stood up, and I just called him an asshole, and I walked out. And that was it. I never saw him again. Except, yeah, I did see him actually once outside of a Dairy Queen. He was walking by with his daughter, and I hid in a phone booth until they passed, and then I went in and I got myself a peanut butter parfait.
My mother confronted my grandmother about this and wanted to know why she had done this. And she told my mother that she was so much in love with me because I lived with her and I just became part of, like her own baby once again, that she couldn't bear to part with me. So she decided she would just, destroy this relationship. I really think my grandmother was wicked doing what she did. She destroyed two people's lives, neither one of whom have had happy marriages, and if they'd been together, they might have had a very happy life together. I went to Utica and met Mario and all my aunts and uncles and cousins and my 4 half-brothers and sisters, but it really wasn't a very sort of happy ending to this story because Anne, Mario's wife, when I sort of finally materialized into a real person, she just simply couldn't deal with it. And Mario had also made the mistake of telling her that my mother was the only woman he really truly loved. So, no woman really likes to hear that. So I can understand in a way why she was a little angry at my being there. All I wanted to do was have a relationship with my biological father. I decided not to continue with the relationship. I'd lived without this man in my life for 40 years. I didn't know he existed. So I didn't need him in my life for the rest of my years. So that's what I've done.
It's 4 years since Terry and I first met, and obviously we're married. I have a beautiful 3-year-old little boy with him. His name's Joshua. I'm expecting my second. It's a little girl. And the weird thing is, even after all this time, I had never met this matchmaker who fixed Terry and I up. It just struck me, that I owe her so much because she changed my life. There's a term that I recently heard. The word is beschert. It's a Yiddish word. And I think the loose translation is someone who is destined to be your beloved. It's just kind of neat how we only met because this matchmaker, who I never met and he never hired, put us together. It kind of makes you think that he's my beschert. This crazed, scary kind of relationship. It's really different. I feel like I'm home. And that's, I get all choked up when I say that.
But I shall never forget my daughter. She was so upset. She was Italian. I don't know why. And she doesn't know why now either.
I have no idea what I'm doing now. I'm just making things up.